Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and welcome back to another episode of Mario's Minute. For those who do not know, this here is my second podcast I do. My main podcast is Mod Chat, in which it is a little more edited, a little bit more structured, and that's where I like to talk about things that I find new, interesting, or cool, or what have you, in the world of video game modding and video game console modding. However, this is not Mod Chat. This here is Mario's Minute, which is a separate podcast in which I come on here at least once a month. Well, actually just monthly. I just keep it to monthly, but I come on here monthly. Sometimes I have a guest on, sometimes I don't, and I talk about whatever the hell I want to, for the most part. We've been guestless for a minute here, and that's fine, and that is, on me. But I will say, if you've been listening, if you're a return listener, I really do appreciate the listenership, viewership, and really just hanging out, because this is more where I'm a little more personal on the channel, because it's really just myself, a mic, and whatever the hell's going on screen over here. Now, actually, I should speak about that as well, too. There is a couple ways that you can consume this podcast. The first one is, of course, in a visual version here on the Mr. Mario 2011 YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey channels. Additionally, it is also available in a podcast audio-only form, so you can take it around and listen to it wherever the hell you want to. Simply look up Mario's Minute on your favorite podcasting app, host, provider, or platform, and you should hopefully be able to find it. I know it's not available on all of them, but it is available on most of them. Either way, like I said here, this is my podcast where I come on here monthly, and I kind of just talk to you all about whatever the hell I want to. Sometimes I have a guest on, sometimes I don't. Not sure when we're going to be doing that here. Maybe there'll be a little bit less of a busy month. I know usually I say that, but I've also kind of just had the realization, it's like, oh, I kind of do a lot. That's what happens. So sometimes if I'm a little quiet, that's just what's going on here. Either way, kind of getting into this, I did have a few topics I wanted to talk about, and one of them was the PlayStation Studios closure of Bluepoint Games. Now, I will say when this was announced here, and when exactly was it announced? It was announced on February 19th, so at least at the time of recording, just a few days ago. And then by the time this episode will go out, it will be about a week since this had been released here. But for those who do not know, Bluepoint Games is a really, at least in the PlayStation world, a really well-known and really respected game developer. They are a subsidiary, and this is just according to Wikipedia here, just saying their company type. However, I never really looked directly into their entire list of games, and looking at it here, it looks like they've really just been responsible outside of their very first game, which was a game I'd actually never heard of in 2006. It looks like this had to be a digital game. Yeah, just looking at the icon, it had to be a digital game for the PlayStation 3 called Blast Factor. After that, they were really just responsible for HD collections, HD remasters, and then even remakes. So I can read off their entire list of games right here. This company is responsible for the God of War collection, the Eco and Shadow of the Colossus collection, which is fantastic, Metal Gear Solid HD collection, Uncharted the Nathan Drake collection, Gravity Rush Remastered, Shadow of the Colossus 2018, and Demon's Souls, also 2018. So really out of that list, they had one that was original, and then the last two games they ended up releasing were remakes as opposed to remastered. Do I have Demon's Souls? I actually can't quite remember if I have Demon's Souls or not on the PlayStation 5. If I do, I think I ended up picking it up at one point, and I just haven't played it like it came with a bundle and such, because I don't really like getting frustrated playing games, so these Souls-type games, I respect them, I think they're cool, but just not into playing them myself. And then Shadow of the Colossus 2018, that was a really well-done one. That one was a remake right there. So fantastic one. I've played actually, I didn't even play the original. I've played both of their iterations, actually, because I originally played Shadow of the Colossus as the Eco and Shadow collection on PlayStation 3, which that one was just the HD remaster of it, which was fantastic. That was really what Bluepoint excelled at. And then they also did support for 4 other games. They had support for, they supported PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, that was the Vita version, Flower, the PS4 and Vita versions, Titanfall, the Xbox 360 versions, that one I did not know, and then God of War Ragnarok on PS4 and PS5. It looks like on that one they did additional work. And then for the other ones there, I'm talking about Flower, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, and then Titanfall. They were responsible for porting those ones for Vita, PS4 Vita, and then Xbox 360 respectively. So this was the thing with this company. They were typically outside of, like I said, outside of those remakes they did, it looked like they just had one original game there. But then they kind of settled into the whole remastering and then even remaking thing. And they seem to do an incredible job at it. If you have played their games, their releases, they are incredibly sound ports. They're great remasters. They're great remakes. Well, I should say one of them was a great remake, at least. Not even dissing on any of the others. It's just that I only played Shadow of the Colossus 2018. I didn't play Demon Souls 2020, so I don't have experience on that one. But even for the other games, I mean, I've touched up on all these games, like PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale on Vita. I was actually primarily playing that game on Vita. Most of my hours, almost all my hours playing that game are on the Vita. Flower on, I forgot, you know what? I have played this one as well. Yeah, I've actually played all of these. That's awesome. Well, at least the ones they supported. Flower, I missed out on it on the PS3. I played it on the Vita. It didn't play as nicely on the Vita for me, but that was kind of more of a skill issue on my part. But I did play it on PS4. Finally got to play it on PS4 shortly after I got my PS4, and it was fantastic. Titanfall Xbox 360, I remember playing all the builds of Titanfall. Not like the specific builds, I should say, but on all the platforms. I played it on PC. I played it on Xbox One. And it surprised me how good the Xbox 360 port was. They did have to compress a lot down on there, so it didn't look as nice. The sound really took a hit. The sound was really compressed down and just downsampled most likely, and it just did not sound good. It really, like, if you were playing the Xbox 360 port of Titanfall, it kind of felt like you were playing a bootleg version of Titanfall, if that makes sense. But the one thing that really surprised me, and again, this coming from someone, I played it on Xbox One, I played it on PC, somehow the 360 version ended up loading the fastest. That didn't make sense to me, but like it kind of just shows what wizards they were at this craft here. And then Ragnarok, God of War Ragnarok, fantastic game right there. Now, the reason why I was going through all their games developed was because initially when this news had ended up hitting, everybody was shocked by it. Everybody was shocked. Everybody was panicked by this here. I guess panic is a strong word, but people were really disappointed. That's what I should be saying. People were disappointed. People were shocked with this. And this was originally, when I had first seen it, it was actually Jason Schreier who had posted an announcement about it. He had said, breaking, PlayStation is shutting down Bluepoint Games, the studio responsible for modern remakes of classic games such as Demon Souls and Shadow of the Colossus. Bloomberg News has learned a shocking end for a well-respected studio. Roughly 70 employees will be impacted by the Bluepoint closure. Bluepoint was working on a God of War live service game until it was canceled early last year. Then the studio spent the last year pitching and trying to determine what it would do next, and he had a full story to that as well. So it's certainly interesting here because it looks like to me, I'm going to echo what one person had said. I guess just kind of get the negative out of the way, and then we'll kind of move on from this here. If you look at this, even if you include the support that Bluepoint Games had done for several games, they had not had a game that was at least being announced that it was being worked on and like wasn't canceled until it looked like, well, it was about a year ago that God of War live service one was canceled, which is a very strange departure. I'll say that. Just reading off that list of games, when you think about them, just even hearing that from a few minutes ago, moving on to a God of War live service game just does not seem like a great fit for a studio like this that is really excellent at taking existing games and remastering them and even remaking them. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there. But outside the work they did in 2022, we really haven't heard much from them. Of course, there was that live service game, like I mentioned, but that was canceled about a year ago. So I guess I'm just wondering here why Sony didn't push this studio more in just working on bringing back more of their titles, because we do see that there's a lot of love for older games. There's actually a lot of it is being missed out on as well. And also, I mean, you have a studio like this that has proven they had a fantastic track record here. They really didn't have any misses, I would say, on this, but you had a really trusted, really respected studio right here, and yet you're sitting on the Bloodborne license and not doing anything with it. Now, I'm one of those people, I'm not, I'm not into the Soulsborne type games, but even I'll acknowledge, I'm like, no, Bloodborne's cool. People want Bloodborne. Yes, you can pick up the old copy on PS4. You can play it on PS5. There's going to be, it'll run better, for sure, but there's no enhancement patch. It is possible to play the game at 60 frames per second. We've seen it thanks to Lance McDonald. We've seen that available. So if you modify your PS4 or PS5 and then modify the game itself, you can have a better experience than what is out there, which just seems like such a missed opportunity to even just have them work on like a frame pacing and 60 frames per second patch for this. Would have done so much goodwill and would have excited so many people. And that's just one game. That's just one game I'm talking about right there. Sony on their consoles, they have so many games that people are wanting more of, that people want to play, that people want to replay, that people respect, that people love. And it just seems like, again, such a lost opportunity to have a studio like this that was really worth its weight in gold in terms of the technical talent, in terms of what they were able to do. And really, they were able to provide some fantastic experiences that people overall seem to really enjoy, and you just shut them down like this. I hope, I really feel for the employees there. Losing a job is never great unless it's something that you absolutely just hated, but even then is so destabilizing and everything. I really hope they get some good positions in the industry and they can leverage some good contacts and such, because there's going to be a lot of there's a lot of good talent right there at that company. So we'll see how it goes there. But it was such a disappointing piece of news to see. I can just kind of echo that from everyone else that's kind of talked about that there. Gaming is in an odd space right now in terms of some of these big companies. I'm actually going to be talking about another one here, I guess Team Green. This is going to be for the Xbox, what we've been seeing there, because even like around the time this was ongoing here, and it seemed like the timing was so strange with everything. I'm not even saying this is coincidental here, but it's just, we kind of just got hit with a whole bunch of this. So not only we end up getting this news here, there was also the news of Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond leaving Microsoft and I guess Xbox. I think Phil Spencer retired. Sarah Bond, she's being cycled out. There's going to be someone else who is taking over as CEO there, who was previously in charge of a lot of AI-related things, so I don't really have good feelings there. But even then, I mean, you see how Microsoft's been going, where they've been increasing the price of Game Pass. They've obviously been wanting to get out of the console market, and even in the console market, they've been wanting to go more and more subscription-based and more digital-only, phasing out physical games, to the point where you have retailers, big box retailers. Costco is the first one to go. You have big box retailers that are just not stocking Xbox stuff now. That's very bad. That is very bad right there. And to Microsoft, I guess they were thinking that, well, it doesn't really matter, because guess what? You don't need an Xbox to play on Xbox anymore. Everything is an Xbox. Your phone is an Xbox thanks to xCloud. Your computer is an Xbox thanks to the Xbox Marketplace and application. Your Xbox is an Xbox. Your PlayStation is an Xbox because you can play Xbox games on there. I've said Xbox quite a bit, but I'm reminded of something that somebody said, which was, it really stuck out to me. I heard this several months ago, and I kind of just changed how I look at a bunch of companies and how they move. I believe her name is Laura Fryer. She used to work at Microsoft. She was there for a while. I don't quite know what she does now. I just know her from YouTube videos she's done, where she gives a fantastic look at at the industry through her perspective, her opinions, things like that. And the poignant thing she said in one of her videos that really stuck with me was that you can have good leaders, you can have good people as good leaders, but these good leaders can also make bad decisions based on the data that they're being given. And a lot of these, and I think even at the time she used Phil Spencer as an example. She said, look, Phil Spencer is a smart guy. Phil Spencer knows what he's doing. But then sometimes when you see him make some of these decisions that are completely left field and don't seem like Xbox or Phil decisions or anything, he ends up being, whoever's at the top ends up having to be the fall person. So, if that ends up failing, it is on Phil Spencer. But more than likely, he ended up making some of those decisions based on data that he was given. And if you have bad people in the chain who are providing bad data, who are pushing it further up the chain, but it's framed as, hey, this is good if you do this here, and then it comes out, that's a decision based on bad data, not necessarily to spite people there. And one of the examples I was thinking of with that was not even gaming related. It was actually here on YouTube, or I mean, you might be listening or watching this somewhere else, but it was on YouTube here. This was several years ago, and it's funny. I had an episode of Mario's Minute. One of my best friends, Pathogen David, he was on there, and he's a developer, and he ended up giving his own perspective on there, which I did disagree with. I didn't feel that was there, but everybody has an opinion on it. But that's also why I love the guy as well too, because he offers these other things. It's like, look, we're going to disagree on this here, but I don't love you any less. It's just that's where I feel this is. But it was a YouTube platform decision. And this was years ago when you can look at my channel, for example, and it has a verified checkmark on there. Now, typically, verified checkmarks on YouTube were for channels with over 100,000 subscribers, or they had some kind of official branding behind them. So, for example, a Sony channel, a YouTube channel, a Microsoft channel, an Xbox channel, those would have verification checks on them. Or if it was both, it was over 100K and it had some kind of official brand that you had to make sure it was the official one there, and then they would give you that check mark now. For the most part, people know of it as hitting 100K. YouTube had ended up making a decision where they were going to remove a lot of those verified check marks. And the reason being for that was they said that essentially when people overall, they looked at, I believe they said, sorry, I'm stumbling on this, but it's just, they had looked at some data that they were given, and see, we're going to bad data, but they looked at some data they were given, and they essentially said that when asking people, the public and such about it, there was a lot of confusion about these verified check marks, because there were a lot of people who thought that if they were watching a video from a creator and they had a verified check mark on them, they had some kind of official position in a way. It wasn't just verifying that they were the real creator. They were like the official spokesperson for that or something. So the way I read this here is maybe this could be an example. Let's say there's a software. You know what? How about this? Great Xbox 360 modding piece of software, Fat Explorer. I'm going to say this, I'm not affiliated with Eaton and, Fat Explorer and Eaton Works and the development there. I would say I'm friendly with Eaton. I'd say we're cool. I have paid for his software, but whenever I promote it, when I talk about it, I don't make a dime off that. I legitimately just think the software is awesome. But let's say I made a video talking about a really big update in Fat Explorer, and I was talking about it and I was showing how to do it and everything there. I guess YouTube is trying to say that if people were watching my video on Fat Explorer and they saw that my channel had a check mark next to it, that gives me, I guess, some kind of authority figure certification that I am like Mr. Fat Explorer in some way. Like that, I'm going to be the official channel for that. And for the most part, when YouTube ended up describing this, people all across the board were like, what are you talking about? No, nobody thinks that with these check marks. Nobody does. You're saying that people think that? Who thinks that specifically? Which people were asked about this? Who was asked about this? We need to know. We didn't hear about any of these surveys that went out. We don't know who you were asking. Like, who legitimately thinks this way? None of us have heard anybody who thinks like that there. And that could also be, data that's also received in the other. And maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm the person who I'm looking at it and I'm, a little more in tech here, and I'm saying, oh, okay, if this person, like if this organization has a check mark, that means they're the official one. If this creator has a check mark, that means that they are the official channel of that creator there. That's what makes sense to me. And maybe it's the rest of the world. Maybe it's regular people who don't think like that. I'm not sure. Maybe someone else can verify. But what I'm saying there is that was a decision that was made on bad data. And I would also bet that it was made on bad data because it had such an uproar that YouTube ended up reversing that. Originally as well, too, with how that went, just wrapping it up here, originally what YouTube was trying to say was that they were going to let you keep your check mark until a certain date, But in order to keep the check mark going, you had to fill out a form, and you had to provide some kind of good tangible evidence that you needed that check mark. And one of the things was, for example, if you are a creator and your content has been covered in news, or it's been cited in news or something like that, then you would be, I guess, important enough to still keep your check mark on there. Kind of annoying, kind of gross in all honesty. But I remember I did have that form. I ended up filling it out. And then after like a day or two, they just went back on their decision. They said, hey, never mind. We're not going to keep these here. If you do have a check mark and you are impersonating another channel, then most certainly, no, we're going to take it back. But for the most part, no, if you already have one and you're good, just keep it. You're okay. So that's what I mean by that. Like, bad data right here. And that's where a lot of these decisions end up coming from. And it just happens when there's a lot of these companies that just lose touch and lose touch and lose touch, and they do this as they get bigger. I actually end up seeing right before this, actually, I end up seeing a video from somebody who they were talking about the Amazon layoffs, and they had left Amazon before the layoffs because they said they saw the writing on the wall. But they were talking about how things just didn't make sense there. Like at first they said, like, 10 years ago, it seemed like they were all there to fix some issues and really make the platform better. And now, as of the last few years, at least from her perspective, she was saying, yeah, no, we kept hiring people, hiring more people. And then it's like we have 6 project managers to supervise like a checkout page, like an issue with a checkout page being fixed up, or we have to go to all these meetings. That was a big one. She said in one day, over like a 12-hour period, she went to like 13 meetings. She was saying like the engineers, the software engineers that are there, they spend like a third of their time coding, and the rest of the time is really just spent in meetings. And then in those meetings, it's really just endless blame games and people trying to issue hot fixes who are actually doing the work. They're issuing hot fixes to try and get credit there, but it's either trying to get credit for good stuff or shifting the blame to other people. And they're not really fixing the issue. So to actually fix up an issue or a bug, it's taking months to do it, as opposed to some that should take hours or maybe even at most days or weeks. Bad data. That's what I'm saying. Bad data here. Really disappointing to see this with Bluepoint. Will we see more? Will we see maybe more good work, like good remasters, good remakes come out? I certainly hope so. But like I said, I still think many of these decisions come down to bad data, when it's like there's games such as, I'll reference it one more time, Bloodborne on there, where people have been begging for anything. For like, people are just like, dude, we don't even need a full remake. We don't even need a full remaster. Just give us a patch. That's it. Just give us a patch, like a PS5 patch that unlocks a frame rate. If you can fix some of the other things, that'd be great. But that's really what people want. And you had a perfect studio to do it, and not doing it there for whatever reason. Speaking on authority figures here and such, one thing I want to talk about, this is sometimes how this goes, right? I'll kind of just remember some old stories, and I had remembered one person here who kind of just sounded like an authority figure on a lot of stuff, and this ended up, I'm not going to name out other names, right? And I'm not even talking about people in the community. I'm not, certainly not in this community. I'm not talking about, there's so many people I can think of, is the thing. But I guess I'll describe this story and maybe just kind of take it and use it as a learning lesson here. So there was one person, this was several years ago, one of my best friends, he had invited me to a sudden barbecue that was happening. I guess his brother will just like randomly do these barbecues, right? He'll just get some meat, he'll set up a grill in like a park somewhere, and he'll just invite people. And he, of course, he invites his friends, he invites his family, but then he'll also just invite completely random people. Like, he'll invite people in his apartment building, he'll invite people that he met at restaurants and stuff. So it was a really cool, cohesive, just, group of misfits all, ganged up together, who were just there to hang out, enjoy the day, and eat some good food at the park. And it was some fantastic food. It wasn't even good, it was fantastic. However, there was one person I was talking to, and he seemed to be around my age. I couldn't really tell if he was younger or older, but this was a few years ago. And he just kept talking and talking and talking and talking. And, I didn't really have all too much else going on. I'm just there. I'm waiting for the food to cook. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll listen to this guy. And the thing is, he talked real eloquently. He just kept going. And he seemed to have a lot of knowledge. So, interesting person to talk to, right? And then he was talking about, like the different jobs he's had, the different careers. So he starts everything he was saying, he wasn't trying to talk down on people, right? He wasn't trying to talk at people. He was really just sharing this stuff and, sharing experiences and almost, I don't really know if he was kind of like a walking billboard for his skill sets or what, but he was just kind of trying to flex that like a tiny bit, because people were really grabbing onto it, especially at one point. He was talking about how, he was a dog trainer and the stuff he knew about dogs. And he kind of just kept, and he'd want to show his expertise by doing stuff like this. I was telling a story, like I was talking about something, and I was like, oh yeah, the other day I was walking, and I saw a dude running with their husky puppy, and he's just like smiling, listening to me. He's like, oh, well, he's not supposed to run his dog before a year old. And I was like, I mean, the dog looked pretty happy. And he's like, yeah, I mean, the dog might be happy, but you're not supposed to run them before they're a year old. And I'm like, well, it's not my dog. I don't know who the person is. I'm going to continue on with my story. Kind of things like that. He would share some of his stories of like difficult dogs he's worked with and things like that, and just all these different clients that he had. And then other people, they're just like, man, you've had like so many jobs, like you've had so many careers. Like how do you do all of that? And I don't remember the reason or the excuse he gave for it there, but he kind of just sounded like overall, like he kind of posed himself like as an expert of everything. You know what I mean? You all might know people like that. But then I was kind of able to find that it was just a sheen of nothing. Because what ended up happening is at one point, I think he asked me about my interest and we started talking about video games. Now he got excited. He starts talking to me about video games, right? And this is something that I know. I'm not an expert at video games, I would say, but the thing I tell people is that you pull me next to somebody, like if I'm just walking down the street and you pull me and someone else and start having us talk about video games, I probably know a decent amount more than the average person does about these games. I'm not saying that in like a prideful way or like a flex or anything. That's just how it's going to be. So what happened was we start talking about this. And he's talking to me about different games he plays. He's telling me about like the Raspberry Pi setup he had. And he's like, oh man, I set up a Raspberry Pi and, I put like all these games on it and I put like RetroPie on there. And oh man, bro, I end up putting like Pokemon Blue on there and I played that thing all night. It was awesome. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's cool. And at one point, I guess I'll tell it in two stages, right? So one of the things was he had said, man, it would be cool, it'd be awesome if they just made like an adult type Pokemon, like if they made something like that, like kind of the kid Pokemon, but kind of like a grown up version of it. And this game had just came out. I was like, they just made one of those. He's like, what? No, they didn't. And I said, yeah, they did. Pokemon Arceus. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, Pokemon Arceus, it's on the Switch. He's like, I don't have a Switch. I'm like, oh, well, it's on the Switch, but the exact thing you're describing where you want like a mature Pokemon game, I would say, not like adult, but like a more mature one that like, teenagers and adults would have more fun playing. It's just a bit deeper and everything. Like the exact thing that you're describing, they just made that. And this was before Pal World, by the way. But he ends up pulling out his phone and he looks up Pokemon Arceus and he's getting excited. He's like, oh man, this is awesome. Like, this is awesome. This is really, dude, this is so cool. What, Arceus, is that what this is called? I've never heard of this. I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, when did this come out? This just came out? Oh man, I got to get a Switch. I think I'm just going to buy a Switch just to get this game. This is awesome. So it was exciting with that, but like, that was something he didn't know about. And I'm like, okay, you know what? That's fair. You don't have a Switch. You weren't following the new Pokemon games. Whatever. That happens. But then at one point, there's a lull in the conversation and he's just, sitting next to me. He's like, oh man, what game was real crazy? What game was really awesome? Silent Hill, man. I'm like, oh yeah, I love Silent Hill. And he's like, yeah, man, I remember that game was so scary. I remember being so scared playing it. I remember playing that on my Super Nintendo. Man, that game was so scary. And without a beat, I'm just like, it didn't come out on Super Nintendo. And he kind of looks at me. He's like, yeah, it did. I'm like, no, it never came out on Super Nintendo. Are you sure? Yep. You sure? Yep. It never came out on Super Nintendo. And the conversation was just kind of like that. And he was still, the thing is though, the reason why I was able to kind of like see through that sheen finally is because the way he delivered that to me, just so confidently, just so directly, that he played Silent Hill on the Super Nintendo. The confidence and the delivery that he had with that was the same confidence of the delivery he had with everything else. And then when you kind of think about it, it's like, okay, this guy is about the same age as me, so he hasn't had any long-running careers, and this dude has done about 10 or 15 different types of jobs, which none of them really have much transferable skills to each other, if any at all. Yeah, I think this guy just kind of like blown himself up and trying to seem smarter than he is. And that's usually how it comes down to it. Like there's, and again, there's so many, I'm sure there's people in your life you can think of. There's people in the greater online sphere you can you can think of where they share and they talk about a lot of stuff, and it's stuff you might not know about. So they really seem like an authority or like an expert figure in that. But then when they finally do talk about something that you know a lot about and you listen to them, you're just like, you don't know about this, dude. You really don't know about this. And then at that point, it's kind of fair to question all the other stuff that's been brought up at that point. You know what I mean? So I thought that would be a little bit of an entertaining one, at least. Silent Hill on Super Nintendo did not happen. Now, I will say, I will concede in one thing. I don't know if it was ever developed on Super Nintendo. And what I'm talking about is I don't know if they had like a prototype that maybe they ran some lines of code with like a Super Nintendo ROM or something like that. I don't know. I'm going to be honest, I doubt it, because Silent Hill came out in, 1999? And by then, the original PlayStation had originally released. It released in Japan in 1994. So actually, no, even saying that out loud, no, even going back, now you know when you like think of something that's like you could have told the person. I'm just like, no, with the game coming out in 99 and just the timeline of there, it wouldn't have even made sense for the game to start development on Super Nintendo. So no, I think it's fair to say it's not just that Silent Hill was not on Super Nintendo, it's that Silent Hill was never on Super Nintendo. Oh boy. So another story here I want to share, and this is typically, what I'll do here on the on this podcast, at least. I'll tell some game store stories. And I'm not sure which ones exactly I'm going to tell here. I have a few that I have lined up but for those who don't know, what I like to do in these solo episodes is near the end, I like to talk about some experiences, some stories that I've had at the local game shop that I used to work at. I don't live at the place anymore. I didn't live at the game shop. It's like I don't live in that same town or anything. This game shop, it was a local shop that I worked at, like local mom and pop game shop I worked at for about 2.5 years. It was my last half of high school, and then I quit before going to college. I still worked there that summer, but I ended up quitting because I was going to college there, and I just didn't work there again. But I was still, friends with the employees and stuff. I'd still drop by. I got my discount and all that, so, it was a good time there overall. But either way, I ended up, I guess I'll share this. The shops have been out of commission for so long. Like, they've been closed down. They haven't been around for a while. And recently I was back in that town, and I'm just thinking of Silent Hill now. I'm sorry. I'm just like in my restless dreams I still see that town or that game shop. But no, I ended up going back to the same town, and when I was doing some shopping, I ended up dropping into a store. I was with my girlfriend, and she was going to this shop, and I was like, hey, hold on, I'll just head in there. I'll be in there in a few minutes. Because pretty close to where we were going was the location that I used to work at. Now, it's been so many years since these shops, like the game shops I worked at, since they've closed down. It's been many, many years. But since then, several shops have come and gone. At this point now, the location I'm thinking of, there's been at least 2 shops that have been in that storefront. The last time I went there, I was able to peer through the windows. This is a few years ago. The actual store was closed at that time, but I could still see some remnants of the shop. But I'll say this, the shop that's taken over that physical retail space now, it has nothing to do with video games, completely different departments and all that stuff. But there was a new store that was there. So I just decided to go in there and pretend to be a customer. And I did that. I did a little bit of like dawdling, like looking at some of the products there. But I was also just kind of doing some looks around at the shop. And it was a little sad. I'm not gonna lie, like I might have been the only person who was like a little sad there, and I was maybe like the only person who could really like feel it at that moment. But I say that because when I went in there, outside of the physical location, like the actual physical store being the same, so it's not like they expanded into another retail space. They didn't split the retail space. The retail space was the exact same, right? Aside from that, the shop was officially at a point now where it was completely unrecognizable. Like, you go in there, there was not an inkling, there was not a hint, there was not a reference, nothing. There was absolutely no signs, no hints that the game shop I used to work at was in that exact retail space. And you see plenty of photos and videos of, towns, like how they used to look, and just like big spaces, like you'll see like one area could have been like a giant town square where it had everything that was going on there, everything was popping off, everything was jumping, and then you look at it like 80 years later and it's a highway. It's an interesting feeling when you get that from a place that you spent so much time at. And maybe I think there's a lesson in there too of, hey, work is great. Work is also necessary, to a degree, because it's like, hey, we all kind of need money to get by and do what we're doing in life. But work is also not forever, because work can change, work can end, and all the memories, all the times, coworkers came through, all those different, all the different events that happened through there, all the different meetings, the laughs, some of the crying, some of the stress, all the sales, of course, even the product as well too. So many years later, the physical retail space is still there. The actual, I wouldn't even say blueprint, but I would say the footprint is still unchanged. But when you go in there, there's absolutely no sign of the history of that place. And to be fair, I don't know what shop was in there before us. I could probably dig it up and look. I should actually probably do that, but I can't remember. But the signage is gone. There's really no sign rash or anything. Just no hints of any of it there. And I remember right after that, I walked out of the store and I messaged one of my best friends, and I'm just like, dude, it's so strange. I just went to our old game shop we were at. There is not a hint. There's not even a single hint of where we used to be at, and we spent so much time and ran through so much money there and such, and it was just a little bit of a little bit of an experience, in a way. I think I'm still kind of processing it right now in a way, but it's just like, wow, now at this point, I hardly even have pictures of the place as well too. I might have a video here or there, not on the channel, but the shop really just lived outside of, outside of, how do I put it, like legal documents and stuff, like, set up with the state or, even anything. I guess, yeah, it would be like the state, like where it is located and such. Outside of that, business formation documents and such, there's really no trace of this store in that location right there. So sometimes it just makes you think, I still enjoy the memories I had there. That was cool, but just interesting to experience that overall, because even just I can like close my eyes and think back to like some of the last times I walked in that store, and not only was it a little bit depressing, even at the time, like near the end there, it was just like not great. They were cutting way too many corners, but all that just completely wiped away. And I did go to, and for reference, like it's been several years, mind you, many, many years, so it's probably even different now, but I went back to our first location at one point, and I did the same thing. I went in there, kind of walked around, just pretend to be a customer, and it is almost unrecognizable. At that point it was. I could still look at things and be like, okay, yep, they end up keeping this wall the same color, this used to be this, but even to that location, the shop was let's say a medium size, right? And then in the back, there was a ton of retail space in the back. And essentially what they did was they ended up knocking down some of those walls and they just expanded it greatly. So the shop was still like the retail footprint there was still the same. Like it's still what we had, except they made it much more open. And they kind of kept some of that still the same there, like kind of some of the layout stuff. Like I said, like some of the colors of the walls that were painted. But overall, it's like, no, a lot of this stuff changed. And even back then, I remember like even when I left the shop, I got like, a little bit emotional, kind of like looking back and everything, because it was just like, wow, it was pretty much at a point where it was virtually unrecognizable from what used to be there. But if you had been in that shop before, if you had worked in that shop like me, but even if you had just been there and you had some memories of it, you could at least put some pieces together. But this one here, this one I went to, no, completely wiped away. Not a single hint. That was a little bit of a depressing, update to the game store stories. Let's say that. You know what? That was a 2026 update, let's say. However, let me tell some other stories. Some of these, man, you know what? I really know how to pick them. Some of these other stories, I'm just looking at the titles here, and like these ones are kind of depressing in their own rights as well too. But I'm still going to share them. I'll still share them. One of them was about an original Nintendo. Now, it was at this shop, like the one that I said I just went to, and it was completely like there's no hint of the old shop anymore. It was at this location. We had this giant Nintendo. It was, the NES, the original one. We had a giant box for it, and it was the console. I want to say it came with the power pad, and it came with some games, right? And there was a couple, they had just gotten off church. They just went to church. They left, obviously because they left church. They end up coming to this game shop, and the guy was so excited. I believe he was there with his fiance, and lovely couple, right? But he was really excited about the Nintendo games. And he was just like, he started looking at them, and then he wanted to get an original Nintendo, and then he saw the one we had in the back, and he was like, yo, whoa, that's cool. We're like, oh, this is cool, right? And it was not only physically a big box for this, but it was also a big ticket item. At the time, this had to be maybe 2010 or so. And I remember it was a Nintendo system with the power pad and everything, and it was the original box, and I think it was probably at least $150, maybe $200. So he was going to be getting a Nintendo, and he was getting more and more excited as we were talking to him, right? And he sees that one, he's like, oh man, does it have everything? And we unbox, and he's like, oh, it has everything. Oh, this is amazing. And you could see his fiance was really trying to be supportive, but she was just like, do we really need to get this? Do we need to get it? And he's telling her, he's like, no, baby, listen, look, like we can, it's going to be so great. Like it has the power pad. And she's like, I know it has it, but like, do we, like, dude, what, do we need to get it? Like, are we really going to be playing it? He's like, yes, we're going to be playing it. She's like, okay, you're going to be playing it, but are we going to be playing it? He's like, yes, the kids are going to be playing it. The kids can play this. I want to show it to them. I want to play this with them. And she's like, I don't think the kids are interested in this. I really don't think they are. And he's like, no, baby, they're going to be interested. They're going to be interested. So he's going over to our wall of Nintendo games. One of our employees is helping him out because it was behind a glass, and then you had to unlock the glass, slide it open, and he was looking at the cartridges, and he's getting more and more excited. So he's got like a nice little stack of games, right? Just getting really excited about this. And he's like really convincing his fiance, and you could see, and I'm not trying to push him on the sale, but you could just see he was going back to his kid days. And his fiance, I mean, now as more of an, because I was a teenager, I wasn't even an adult then, but now as an adult, I can look back and I could be like, yeah, this wasn't going to work out. But you could just tell she wasn't really enthused by it. And she was bringing up good points. She wasn't trying to bring him down, but she's like, I don't think the kids are really into these games. I don't think they really want to play this. I don't think they want a Nintendo. I think they want something else. And he's like, no. They're going to be interested. I'm going to show them everything, and we're going to play this together, and it's going to be great. And we got him completely set up with this, right? And then at the end, he had to pay for it. So it was the console. It was a stack of games. I don't remember if he got any extra controllers. I think it already had all the stuff. But then there was an issue with the payment. So he was going to be paying, he didn't have enough cash, so he was going to use a card. And then he didn't have an ID with him. And we were at least I was, but for the most part, we were strict with this. I was extra strict. To this day, I would ID every single person who had a card, And I believe I can count on one hand the amount of times I forgot to ID someone. It was just a legitimate mistake. I think it was probably less than 3 times I forgot to ID someone out of the thousands of transactions that I did. So what happened was I said, hey, do you have an ID? He doesn't have his ID. He starts going through his cards. He's like, I have another card I can show you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I can't, we can't do this without an ID. And he's really thinking about this. He's really thinking about it. And at one point, his fiance was just like, hey, hold on. We'll be right back. Can I just talk to you, please, real quick? So we had a bench outside, and him and his fiance go out there. I don't know what they were saying, but, they were sitting next to each other, and you could just see he's kind of slumped over. He's looking sad, and she's just talking to him. She wasn't yelling at him. She didn't seem upset, but she was just talking to him. And you could just see, just through his body language, he just looked really disappointed and really sad. Like, he just really wanted this experience. I'm sure this was something that he really dreamed of. And after a few minutes, he came in, he just looked sad, and he was like, guys, I'm sorry. I guess it's just not meant to be. And we're like, what's wrong? And he's like, yeah, it's just, we don't live near enough here to, make this, the trip and all that. And, I don't have the ID for this here. And I don't think we'll be able to do it. Unfortunately, I just don't think we can do that. But somehow we ended up bending the rules a little bit. I believe his fiance ended up paying. They ended up getting it. And she was trying to look for I'm a little hazy on the ID process. I guess he didn't have one directly, and she maybe didn't have one. I don't know. I think they forgot their IDs or something, but they had their wallets, but they had their IDs in a different wallet. And she essentially said, well, could I use another card to show this? I have this. I have a Victoria's Secret card. My coworker next to me, he's like, yes, we can use that. And I looked at him, and he's like, no, trust me, we can use it. Someone I know, they have a Victoria's Secret card. In order to do that, you have to provide ID. You have to do all that stuff. Is your name on there? And she said, yeah. And he's like, okay, cool. We can use your Victoria's Secret card to verify the identity on this other card that you have. And that's exactly what we did. And it was well over $250, right? Which was a lot for Nintendo and Nintendo products at the time in 2010. But it was at least $250. I remember he looked so happy. He was super, super happy. And his fiance, you could tell she's kind of like, okay, I mean, as long as you're happy, but we'll talk about it when we get home. And you could just tell he was just, I don't even think he was caring about the repercussions at that point, right? So we end up getting it, and he, again, dude is so happy. One of the happiest customers I'd ever seen. We run that card, it goes through, he's got his Nintendo, he's got his power pad, he's got all the games and stuff. He leaves. About 2 weeks later was when I was working again. And I was with this same coworker, the one who said the Victoria's Secret card was fine. And I start looking around a bit. There was a little bit of downtime. And I look over to the side, and I see a boxed Nintendo that is the power pad, the big power pad version, And I was like, oh wow, wait, did we get another one of those? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, you remember there was that one guy and his fiance, we sold them this exact bundle, right? And he's like, I think that's the same one. And I'm like, no, it's not. And he's like, I think it might be the same one. I'm like, are you serious? What, they returned it? Was there something wrong with it? And he's like, no, I wasn't here for it, but I mean, dude, we just had one of those, and for us to get one back in 2 weeks, what are the chances? And I remember when you open up the box from the side, right, there's a white box inside of there. And I specifically remember we checked it. I was like, let's go ahead and check it. And he's like, how are we going to check it? I said, I don't know. We found out immediately. I pull the box out. I flip the side open. I pull it open, right? And there is a name written in Sharpie on the white box that's in there. And I remember I looked at that and I was like, there was a name written in here, right? And my coworker said, yeah, I think there was. And I was like, yeah, I remember a name being written there. And he's just like, dude, I think that's the same system. I think they returned it. And I'm like, what? The guy was so excited. And my coworker, he was older, married, and everything. He's like, yeah, but did you see his fiance? His fiance wasn't excited at all. Dude, I'm not surprised that they returned it here. I'm actually really not surprised. And I was just like, man, that's disappointing because he was so excited. And he's like, yeah, I mean, he was excited. It's something he wanted, but his fiance clearly was not having it. So I just know our policy back then, the thing that surprised me too, was that our policy was that we would only do returns for credit. We wouldn't do a cash return. We had it on our receipts and stuff, but here's the thing, we made some exceptions, and I have a feeling we probably made an exception for this guy, but it was just so disappointing because I could understand, I could see how it was with his wife and everything, but man, like, we got the thing back, and then eventually we still had it there for a while, and eventually it sold. I don't remember how much it sold for or anything, but we didn't indefinitely keep it there. So hopefully it ended up going to a good home. I feel like my prediction on there is most likely they probably didn't have the disposable funds to really be dropping on that, but they did it anyways, and then they got home, and I feel like his kids probably just weren't really into it. And on top of that, I don't think he was sitting around all day playing Nintendo games in 2010 because he was an adult who had a job, who had a career, who had all this other stuff going on. So I don't think he was just doing that. And I'm not even saying it in a disrespectful way or anything. It's just, I just think that's what happened. I'm sure his wife is just like, okay, dude, we kind of need this, or his fiance was just like, we need this money. The kids aren't using it. You're barely using it. We just got to take this thing back. We're going to take it back, even though it's like, because I think these people too, I think they lived like 2 hours away. That was another thing. I'm not going to say the city they lived in, but I was familiar with it. And I think they were like at least 2 hours away. So you got to realize, like, I'm pretty sure his wife was pushing enough where she's like, look, I don't care. We're going to drive our butts back up there and we're going to return this thing because we are not spending hundreds of dollars that we don't have on something that we're not using. I feel like that's what happened, which, you know what? That's respectable. I get it. So we're getting near the end of this episode here. And one of the things I also like to cover is the games that I'm currently playing. And this one's going to be pretty quick. I'm going to be honest with you all at this point. I really have like barely played anything. I've really barely played anything this month. The only things I'm really playing are I'm still doing my Ring Fit Adventure. I actually ended up having to change it up a little bit. Unfortunately, I think there's just kind of some stuff that happens when you get a little older and everything too, even though I'm still young, but I'm kind of at the point where it's like, okay, well, I can't just like damage my body and then be okay the next day. There's, a little bit of a recovery period, right? I noticed that when I was walking in place, or I guess running in place, one of my legs was hurting in a specific way. And the more I did it, the more it would hurt. Now, soreness can be okay, but if you have pain, you don't want to keep exacerbating it. You want to relax it. You want to calm it down. So, I had to massage this thing. I had to kind of just not work out, not do some leg stuff for a bit. But I was also having just like some other pains as well too. There was a bunch of stuff going on. So maybe that's also why I've been busy. But I'm like, let me just rest my body here a bit. So now one thing I've done, because I tried to get back to it and I was still kind of having that pain. But the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm at the point now where I can still do my Ring Fit Adventure. I can still work out and everything, but now I have to wear shoes when working out. This whole time I was usually, just like training barefoot and doing all that, but unfortunately just not the case now. My body is like, heck no, dude. Nope. You got to put some shoes on because I did that. No pains at this point. Like, I've been good. So that's been the biggest development with my Ring Fit Adventure. It looks like I'm getting to the last level on there, so I'm going to beat it again here soon, and then I'll just restart it all over from the beginning. But I've been playing that. And outside of that, with some of my friends, like I said, some of my best friends and I, we have a weekly standing game night that we typically try to attend, and we've been playing through RV There Yet, which the whole point of this is you and a few, you should definitely be co-oping it because I don't even know how you would play this game by yourself, and you kind of need to get at least 3 people in there, I would say. My friend and I, maybe it's a skill issue, but we try to just do it, 2 people, and we just kept failing and failing and failing. But RV There Yet, you end up playing, you and some of your friends are just bald people in the woods, and you have an RV, and you're trying to conclude your camping trip in the woods by driving back out to civilization, and that is the entire point of the game. It is stupid. It is funny. There's a lot of crude references in there. It is one of those, I guess, kind of like a friend slop game. That's the genre of it, friend slop games. So it's those types of games where they're not super great games to play. They might even be bad games. But when you play them with a group of people
who can play the game, who gets into it, and you know and love each other, like, they're some of the best experiences that you'll have from gaming. So it's one of those games there. But on top of that, we're near the end of the month. I haven't even finished a game yet. I'm not going to be defeated by my own challenge, though. So I'll probably talk about this next month, but I'm most likely just going to have to, like, find a quick game and just burn through it, which sometimes that happens. And you know what? It's okay, because, like, last month I end up clearing some pretty big games on there. So that's just how it goes sometimes. Either way, that's about it for this episode of Mario's Minute. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Hopefully you all were entertained by it in some way. Hopefully, it helps your day go by a little bit better, or your night, or maybe whatever you're doing here. By the way, it's always interesting to read and hear and see what people do when they listen to these episodes. Like, some people will say, they're doing chores, or they're playing a game, or they're modding a system, or what have you. And I always love to hear about that. So, how about this? As opposed to doing, a keyword or a key phrase, we're going to modify it a little bit, right? And this is what I typically do. If you haven't been to the end of one of these episodes here, typically what I like to do is I pick a keyword or a key phrase, and I like to ask people to use that in a comment on the video upload. And if you use it in a comment on the video upload, I'll know that you made it to the end. So instead of using a keyword or a key phrase, how about this? How about share what you might have been doing while listening to this episode, or watching this episode, or consuming this episode? Let's keep it safe for work, mind you. All right, that's going to be my ask on there. But what were you doing while listening to this? Was this the only thing you were focused on? Were you doing some work? Were you driving around, Ubering, shopping, playing a game, fixing up something, modding a few things? That's what I'd be curious about. If you shared what you did for this almost hour episode while it was playing, I'd like to know about your day or night, wherever you're at. Either way, that's about it for this episode of Mario's Minute. If you enjoyed this episode, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. But as I always say, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for listening and watching, everyone, and until next month.